Dutch arrived at a factory, and everything in front of her instantly terrified her. There were many survivors locked in cages, and this place was a human slaughterhouse built by vampires. The vampires quickly noticed Dutch. Dutch wanted to turn and run, but she was already surrounded and couldn't escape in time. Soon after, Dutch was taken to a room with dinner set before her. Just as Dutch was puzzled, Eichhorst appeared and invited Dutch to sit down and eat. Dutch immediately grabbed a knife from the table.
I had so hoped we could have a civilized conversation.
Go to hell, you sick piece of shit.
Dutch was immediately restrained in the chair. Eichhorst smelled Dutch's hair, which scared her from moving. This blood is of the highest quality. No ordinary vampire has the right to drink it. Then, Eichhorst began to enjoy the delicious meal. At this moment, Dutch realized what their production base was used for. Seeing such a twisted vampire, Dutch cursed out loud. Eichhorst, instead of getting angry, asked Dutch one thing: where is Abraham hiding? They have been fighting for nearly 100 years, so Eichhorst wants to personally defeat him to satisfy his own sense of honor. After hearing this, Dutch said it was impossible in this lifetime, because when they were captured by vampires, she saw Abraham being taken away for blood extraction. He is probably a dried-up corpse by now, and Eichhorst became furious upon hearing this. He couldn't bear to think that Abraham died like that. He started threatening Dutch, saying he would turn her into a vampire if she didn't tell the truth. Dutch remained calm and insisted that every word she said was true. Then, Eichhorst took Dutch to Desai's office. He wanted to search for the list of survivors captured together with Dutch that day. Then he would narrow it down to those around 90 years old. After a system search, there were 4 people who met the criteria that day. 3 of them had their blood drained on the spot, and the remaining person was undergoing bone marrow experiments. After learning the location of the last person, Eichhorst immediately got up and left. Before leaving, he instructed Desai to take Dutch to the slaughterhouse and drain her blood. Soon, he arrived at Laboratory 7. This place contained survivors undergoing bone marrow experiments. Following Eichhorst's description, the doctor led him to a bed. When the curtains were opened, it was indeed Abraham lying on that bed. Eichhorst placed his hand over Abraham's heart, feeling the frequency of his heartbeat. Eichhorst was very satisfied. He instructed the doctor to wake him up, but the doctor expressed concern over the danger. They administer a large amount of sedatives every day. If he's injected with amphetamines, his heart won't be able to handle it. Eichhorst became impatient upon hearing this. He threatened that if Abraham didn't wake up, the doctor would become the next subject of the experiment. The doctor, frightened, immediately ordered the nurse to inject amphetamines into Abraham. A group of survivors were locked up and lined up to have their heads shaved. They were about to be taken to the slaughterhouse, but the staff lied to them, saying it was to prevent nuclear radiation. At this moment, Dutch was also captured and brought in. She saw Rosalinda here. Shortly after, Rosalinda was taken away to have her head shaved. Dutch couldn't bear it anymore and started telling everyone that it was all a scam, that those who had their heads shaved would be taken to the slaughterhouse to have their blood drained. The guards immediately moved to control Dutch upon hearing this. Dutch fought back, causing chaos. Upon hearing Dutch's words, all the survivors launched an attack against the guards. With the advantage in numbers, the survivors quickly gained control over the guards. The survivors' anger erupted completely at this moment. Dutch instructed Rosalinda to lead everyone out, while she went to save Abraham. Abraham woke up from unconsciousness and felt something moving in his lower body. He tried to reach out to check, but he was tightly bound to the bed and couldn't move. In the next moment, a venomous snake emerged from the blanket. It was only after Abraham regained his senses that he realized it was an hallucination caused by the injected medication. Then he saw Eichhorst. Eichhorst was delighted to see Abraham awake. He mentioned that they had been fighting for nearly 100 years. He could have ended the feud on the spot. He didn't want Abraham to die like that. He wanted Abraham to personally admit his own failure. However, Abraham had an intense hatred for vampires and wanted to witness Eichhorst's failure even if it meant going to hell. Just as he finished speaking, an alarm suddenly sounded, and Eichhorst immediately went to check. When everyone was drawn away by the alarm, Dutch quietly entered Laboratory 7. She had triggered the alarm herself. Dutch was thrilled to see Abraham alive. She approached him and began to untie him, but just then, Eichhorst appeared behind her.
How touching! What can you possibly do with that?
On the other side, Vasily and the others found the vampire convoy transporting the nuclear bomb. However, there were too many of them, so they could only ambush them halfway. Afterward, Vasily and his teammates began to formulate a plan. Quinlan stood on the route that the convoy had to pass through, watching the slowly approaching cars. Quinlan drew his ancient sword from his back. As the vehicles approached, Quinlan swiftly plunged the sword into the side of one of the cars. Bone Sword scrapped the car on the spot. When the large truck behind it approached, Quinlan slipped under the trailer. Then, Quinlan appeared on top of the truck. When the guards at the back saw him, they immediately contacted the front truck. Upon receiving the alarm, the vampires climbed onto the roof of the truck to drive away the intruder. Just as they were about to go another round, Quinlan was suddenly lying on the roof of his car. In the next moment, the vampires were severed in half by a cable. After dealing with the trouble, Quinlan went to the driver's cabin and forcefully pulled the driver out. Immediately, he stopped the truck. The car behind couldn't avoid it and crashed directly into the truck. Just then, Vasily, who was lying in ambush, emerged from the side and opened fire on the vampire convoy. Just when everyone thought they were safe, one vampire miraculously survived. It was about to launch a surprise attack on Vasily when Quinlan swiftly killed it with a sword. Then Vasily loaded the truck with the necessary parts for the bomb. As long as Roman could fix them, they would have a chance to completely eliminate the blood ancestor. Watching Vasily and Charlotte's joyful expressions, Quinlan also remembered his former lover. In 1800, Louisa is walking down the street when she is suddenly molested by two men. Louisa pulled out a small knife and slashed one of the men's faces upon seeing that. The man became furious and directly taking back the knife, he then cut Louisa's hand, leaving a wound. Just as the two men were about to continue their assault, Quinlan appeared. He swiftly threw one of the men away and then snapped the other one's neck. Louisa was instantly frightened and panicked, but after she saw Quinlan's face clearly, she gradually calmed down and even revealed Quinlan's identity.
You are an immortal.
He was suffering from syphilis and was on the verge of death. Unable to bear seeing her brother suffering from the disease, Louisa brought Quinlan back home. At that time, Quinlan was known as the immortal demon, and thus, many people who desired immortality saw vampires as their belief. Louisa brought Quinlan to the living room, hoping that he could cure her brother's illness. For this, she was willing to pay any price. After hearing this, Quinlan expressed that he couldn't do it because he didn't have the bloodworm inside him. He couldn't turn others into vampires. Louisa was instantly filled with despair. The next day, she personally saw off her own brother. Quinlan sympathized deeply with Louisa's actions. Although Quinlan didn't help much, the woman developed feelings for him. Soon, Louisa slowly led Quinlan into the house. Through her exquisite makeup skills, Louisa transformed Quinlan's demonic appearance into that of a noble prince. Quinlan stared at himself in disbelief. Since childhood, he had been treated as a monster and had always been a wanderer. It wasn't until today, with Louisa, that he felt a hint of warmth. Louisa looked at Quinlan, preparing to give him a passionate kiss. However, Quinlan extended his stinger to reject her. Louisa didn't give up but instead led Quinlan to the edge of the bed. She wanted to experience the pleasure of being bitten by a vampire. Seeing Louisa being so proactive, Quinlan laid her down on the bed. Instead of biting her neck, Quinlan lifted her skirt. He used his stinger to bite her thigh. And Louisa, who was bitten, not only wasn't afraid but also enjoyed it. The next day, Louisa held a funeral for her brother, and Quinlan attended as her boyfriend. They thought Quinlan would continue to live happily like this. However, after the funeral, the priest returned to his residence. Strangely, there was suddenly a large box in the house. Curious, the priest approached and found that the box was filled with soil. Just as the priest was puzzled, F and Alex were lying on the bed discussing life. Suddenly, there was a noise downstairs. F immediately grabbed a gun and went outside. Finding that someone had opened the door, the two slowly walked downstairs. Just as they closed the door, a gun was aimed at them. F and Alex were controlled by Francis. Upon learning that F and Alex were just staying overnight, Francis let his guard down. Alex saw that she was just scared, so she told her that as long as humans work together, they can turn the situation around. Francis, upon hearing this, burst into tears, indicating that she didn't have much time left. She then pulled out a handful of hair from her head. F immediately understood that she had been bitten by a vampire. From Francis's words, they learned that she had escaped from a vampire-established New Horizon. This was the place they had been searching for all along. They immediately became determined and wanted to go there. Francis mentioned that they had painted a rosy picture of the place, making humans believe it was an agricultural community with abundant resources. However, she felt that something was off as soon as she arrived. She escaped quietly and was pursued by a vampire, and after being bitten she fled to this place. F hoped that Francis could take them there. If they could figure out what the vampires were up to, perhaps they would have a chance to defeat them. Francis hesitated for a moment but ultimately agreed to take them to New Horizon. However, on the way, F suddenly noticed a pile of suitcases. F was ready to rush off, but Francis suddenly hesitated. She said that place was like hell, and she wanted to spend the rest of her life in peace. F pulled out a gun and threatened to kill her on the spot if she didn't take them there. Francis begged for mercy, desperately hoping that F would spare her. Alex intervened and stopped F's impulsive actions, stating that she had the right to choose how to live her life. After hearing Alex's words, F reluctantly put down the gun and watched Francis leave. They were left to continue their search alone. After crossing a small hill, they finally saw the New Horizon that Francis had mentioned.
We're not the farmers. We're the livestock.
In the evening, as everyone was sitting in the snowy ground discussing their future plans after leaving Vasily, a figure slowly approached. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was Eichhorst. Benjamin, noticing this, asked him what he wanted. Eichhorst said he was looking for Vasily in Quinlan. Benjamin immediately launched an attack. After dodging the bullets, Eichhorst didn't kill Benjamin. Instead, he demanded Benjamin to take him to find Vasily and the others. To save his own life, Benjamin had no choice but to comply with Eichhorst's orders. Meanwhile, Vasily and the others were discussing how to quickly reach New York. Upon hearing this, Roman mentioned that he had an old friend at an airport nearby. If they exchanged all their supplies, they might be able to get a plane and return. Upon hearing this, everyone immediately started packing and preparing to depart. Before that, Vasily had a private conversation with Charlotte. Because the mission to drop the nuclear bomb would be extremely dangerous, Vasily hoped that Charlotte would stay behind. Charlotte understood Vasily's determination and pretended to agree for now. On the other side, Benjamin, who was being held hostage, was not planning to sit idly by. Taking advantage of Eichhorst's distraction, he quickly turned on the car's radio. At that moment, Vasily and the others were heading towards the airport when suddenly the radio started buzzing. Everyone was puzzled upon hearing it. Then, Benjamin's voice came through the radio. The next second, Eichhorst's voice followed, and upon hearing it, everyone felt that something was seriously wrong. Therefore, they immediately quickened their pace, aiming to fly to New York before Eichhorst could find them. On the other side, Eichhorst discovered the open radio. He immediately questioned Benjamin about when he turned on the radio, and Benjamin remained silent after he was exposed. Eichhorst ordered him to pull over, but Benjamin, instead of slowing down, slammed down on the accelerator. Eichhorst threatened Benjamin to stop, but Benjamin quickly opened the door and jumped out. Immediately, Eichhorst took control of the steering wheel and veered the car into a pile of snow, bringing it to a stop. Meanwhile, Benjamin was desperately fleeing, but he was no match for Eichhorst. On the other side, Vasily and the others finally arrived at the airport. However, there were several bodies at the entrance, which made Vasily feel uneasy. As the car approached the iron fence, the rearview mirror suddenly shattered from a gunshot. After Quinlan identified the sniper's location, he decided to launch a surprise attack. Just as they were about to take action, Roman stopped them. He picked up the walkie-talkie from the car and started calling for Arthur. Upon hearing Roman's voice, the sniper immediately opened the iron gate for them. Subsequently, they drove to the base of the airport tower. Arthur warmly welcomed Roman's arrival. At that moment, Arthur saw Quinlan's vampire-like appearance and immediately drew his gun, while Vasily and the others also raised their weapons.
He's one of the good guys.
He doesn't look like one of the good guys.
I can assure you, Sergeant, you would already be dead if I were not one of the good guys.
After resolving the misunderstanding, Vasily explained their purpose for coming. Upon hearing this, Arthur stated that as long as the price was right, it would be fine. Vasily and the others opened the trunk, indicating that all the weapons and ammunition here could be given to him, except for the nuclear bomb. Seeing so many supplies, Arthur agreed to the deal.